Perfect. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I hope everyone's doing well and staying healthy. My name is Morgan Fuller-Coulterud, and I am the USA Artistic Swimming USOPC Athletes Advisory Council rep and one of the athlete reps on our board of directors. Just to cover a few logistics before we dive in. First, we ask that everyone stays on mute for the entirety of the webinar. There will be time for Q&A with our panel at the end of the session. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. And then lastly, you probably all just got a notification, but this webinar is being recorded so that we can share it with athletes who are unable to attend tonight. So I'm very excited to be hosting our first athlete transition webinar, and just want to start by thanking some of the people who made this possible. So first, thank you to Adam Andrasko, our CEO, for being so supportive of this vision and allowing us to bring this to life. Next, thank you to Terris Tiller and Megan Walther from the USOPC's Athlete Career and Education team for their support and advice in helping to make this a reality. I also want to thank Olivia Ekberg, our AAC alternate, for her support and involvement. And then last but not least, I want to thank Yulia on, and I'm not sure if she's on yet or not, but she reached out to me to ask for advice with her transition after her competitive synchro career ended this summer. And after I spoke with Yulia, I was reminded how important this topic of athlete transition is and how many people in our community are probably struggling with a different retirement or a different transition than they imagined due to the impact of COVID-19. So I was really lucky when I transitioned out of competitive synchro 7 years ago that I knew I was ready to retire, but that didn't make things easy. The transition from being an elite athlete into the real world is really difficult. And I often joke that one of the hardest things for me was figuring out when to shower, because for 17 years, I simply showered when I got out of the pool every day. And then when I retired, I didn't have that structure or that daily routine. And, you know, I didn't know when normal people showered. And so while there's obviously many more difficult parts of transition out of sport, that example just illustrates how much being an athlete impacts your life, even down to the smallest things. So tonight we have two amazing women and former athletes here to help us dive into this topic of athlete transition and to share their stories. So first up is Carrie Barton-Garten. Carrie is a former artistic swimmer and member of the 2000 Olympic team. In 2008, she was inducted into the USA Artistic Swimming Hall of Fame. And this year she was elected as one of the new athlete representatives on the USA Artistic Swimming Board of Directors. Outside of synchro, Carrie is the owner and partner of Garten Executive Search, a firm focused on finding top-tier diverse talent in a range of areas. Welcome, Carrie.
Thank you.
Our second athlete speaker tonight is Emma Baranski. In 2017, Emma graduated from Ohio State, where she was a two-time national solo champion and was awarded the Big Ten Medal of Honor. Emma was a member of the national team in 2017 and was most recently a performer in the Le Rêve show in Las Vegas. She's currently pursuing her MBA from the University of Illinois. Thanks so much for joining, Emma.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
And then leading the discussion with Carrie and Emma will be Terris Tiller from the Athlete Career and Education team at the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee. He uses his experience as a former world-class athlete and over 10 years of work with the USOPC to help drive athletes towards success on and off the playing field, or in and out of the pool in our case. He previously served in athlete services operations for 8 years, following a successful career as a runner at Trinity University and as a modern pentathlon athlete. As a career coach, he pushes athletes to uphold the ideals of Olympism and savor the unique opportunity to represent Team USA. T, thanks so much for serving as our moderator. And with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Morgan. I'm really excited to be here. So I really appreciate you and Adam inviting me to lead the discussion today on transition. As you mentioned, Morgan, I was a former modern pentathlon athlete, and that event consisted of running, swimming, fencing, shooting, and horseback riding. I competed in that from 2000 to 2007, and that's where I got my first introduction into artistic swimming. I have distinct memories of my time at the training center in Colorado Springs, where I would be in the pool doing my workouts when the artistic team was also in the pool, and I can hear the count offs. That's always a vivid memory that always stays with me. So I've had interactions with the artistic community for close to 20 years now. So to be able to come back and do full circle to talk about and help lead a discussion on transition, which is a topic that is really near and dear to my heart, because I know firsthand how difficult it is. I retired from sport in 2007, and I essentially lost my sense of identity. I lost my sense of purpose, and I didn't realize how difficult it was at that time. And as I began my full-time career with the USOPC, I really looked at what were the opportunities and how could I create space to ensure that athletes were connected to the resources that I didn't have access to, which led me to be able to work further in creating opportunities to have discussions like this, to really bring athletes together to talk about the struggle of transition. I think as athletes, we've always been conditioned to, be resilient and grind through the hard times, and to put aside kind of emotions when times get tough. Um, and sometimes that we have to do that, but a lot of times, we need to think about when to ask for help and when to ask for support. And transition being really difficult, it's a time where you really need to lean on your community for support. And you need to be vulnerable and to create space to be heard, because transition is something that as athletes we all go through, and it's going to be difficult. What we have control over is how to minimize how difficult that's going to be by leaning into our support community. So I'm really, really excited to jump into this conversation. But enough about me. It's not about me, it's about you. And it's about our two incredible women, Emma and Carrie. So I want to turn the first question over to Carrie. As an Olympian, what was your path towards to going from being on a club team? Because you and I spoke earlier, and you talked about being on a club team and then going from a small town club team to being on an elite team. And what was that transition process that led you to make an Olympic team?
Yeah, no, thank you. And Terris, it's been such a pleasure getting to know you as well. I mean, it's such an amazing community we have. So thank you, both you and Morgan and everyone for having me. So it's so ironic because I feel like the journey from my small club team that my mom and I created when I was 9 years old, that allowed me to train and compete at the national level for a good 9 years, and then transition to a large club team, is very similar actually to the transition that I ended up having to make in my career. When I was on my small club team, very grassroots, I was a big fish in a really small pond. I mean, the reality was I was competing nationally by the time I was 11 or 12. I was winning, state championships, national championships. And, for my small club team, I was definitely the star of the club, right, at a young age. And I knew, though, that in order for me to succeed, in my sport, and, when I was about 14, I decided that my actual goal was to go to the Olympics. I knew I needed to put myself into a bigger pond with athletes that were better than me, athletes that far exceeded my level, at the level that I was on my small club. Because in order to compete at that level, you have to be challenged. And it's so similar out in the real world. You have to put yourself into a position where you're in a room and you're not the smartest person in the room, right? And so it was very similar to what I did in the transition from a small club to a big club. I ended up at the Santa Clara Aquamaids, which was, and still is, a world-renowned club team in our sport. I went there when I was 18 years old, graduated from high school, and immediately moved there. And it was probably, I feel like the first 6 months of that particular transition is really where I learned my perseverance. So I feel like as an athlete, we have a tool belt and we add all of these tools along the way in our journey. And those first 6 months is when I really added the perseverance attribute. It was difficult. I was now a small fish in a big pond, and I was being challenged daily by athletes, teammates that were much better, far better than I could ever imagine. And I actually almost quit. It was a time of I was away from my family. I was training 8 to 12 hours a day, taking classes for college in the morning and at night. And I would say that I was extremely, it was a very, very stressful time, but I grew from that time. There were so many lessons in such a short amount of time. I had so many people that rallied around me, and it really, I would say, started my journey to the Olympics, that particular moment.
Thanks for sharing that. There's a couple of threads I want to come back to, but before I do that, I want to bounce over to Emma. Emma, you had a little bit different path. You went from, similar to Carrie, you did go from a small club team to a more elite team. You also looked at you competed at a collegiate environment. What was the transition there going into the collegiate environment? How did you navigate that in your experience?
Yeah. So I would say that it was pretty messy. Like, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I think all in all, I went from a really small club team in the Hampton Heronettes in Connecticut. And then I went to the New Canaan Aquayanas, which is one of the bigger teams on the East Coast. And I was practicing, I was going to high school in the morning, and then I was going at the time to a dance high school for 3 hours in the afternoon. Then I would drive an hour down to New Canaan, and I would practice 3 to 4 hours there and then drive home. So my high school schedule was very crazy and hectic. And at the time, I didn't want to make a choice between any 3 of those. So I made that choice, and I kind of thought when I would get into college that I would actually not have to make as many choices. I would be able to major in dance and be on the synchro team and still, do my studies. And it was in college when I realized that I was really overworking myself, and it was quite the transition in college for me. I was taking so many dance classes my freshman year, and at the time I wasn't a dance major. And then I auditioned, and I actually didn't get in as a dance major, and it really broke me. But it was in those moments that I fell in my major that I kind of had to discover new paths and new areas of study. And that's when I learned about arts management at Ohio State, and I learned about all the amazing minors they had to offer. I took so many classes, like a huge variety of classes. And I kind of was able to make my own schedule at that school, which was kind of amazing. Also in college, I was in and out of national teams, and that was also difficult. I had a really hard time making decisions in college, and it wasn't as clear cut for me. But I think something that really helped me during the time was just trying as much as I can and trying to stay involved in the things that I knew that I was passionate about. And sometimes that doesn't always look like what you think it's going to be. Like, being a dance major wasn't really an option for me at the time. And thank God it didn't happen, because when you're a collegiate athlete in a huge program, D1 school like that, you're dedicating many hours in the pool. So, I ended up actually joining a dance club. That was amazing. We did a lot of community outreach, and I just learned so many different things. And sometimes the things that you're trying to discover aren't always going to take the path that you think they will. And sometimes that path will be better in the end.
Thanks, Emma. And both you and Carrie mentioned moments of struggle. And I'm curious as to at what point did you identify you were struggling and when to ask for help? And when you asked for help, or even if you didn't identify you were struggling, but you look to your community, whether as a mentor or as your teammates, what was that process like of looking to that support system, identifying them to say, hey, like, I'm kind of struggling here, or maybe they look to you to say, like, is everything okay? How can we help out? Can you talk a little bit about, those times where like you got that help, whether it's as a team or like from outside of sport? Emma, let's start with you, because I know we've had a conversation about like you've identified mentors outside of sport and how influential that was for you.
Yeah. So for me, I was the captain at the time at Ohio State, my last 2 years there of the team. And I actually really struggled with, I think as athletes, I know like we've talked about it, sometimes we struggle with saying that we need help. And especially I identified being captain as being like, I have to be the strong person. Like I can't show any weakness. And at that time, I kind of struggled actually asking for help, and I kind of just suppressed a lot of my emotions, which wasn't the most healthy way to deal with things. But I was my senior year trying to pursue my dance educator's license in the public school system, and I was volunteering at an inner city school. And the dance teacher that I was volunteering under, I asked her at the time to be my mentor. And this was like a huge lifesaver for me because she was able to really help me have an outside perspective like of my life and things that I'm going to be dealing with in the next few years. And I think sometimes that's really important to have. And sometimes it's important to have it that's somebody that's not involved in your sport or not a family member, like somebody kind of unrelated in that way. Um, that can really kind of look at your life and really, evaluate what do you want? Like, these are some of your strengths. And having that mentor was just absolutely incredible for me. And she actually really guided me through a lot of my next endeavors post college. So I think that's really important for everyone to get one.
Thanks, Emma. Carrie, how did you lean into your support community?
Yeah, no, I so agree with Emma. One of the things I have learned in life is that it's so important to have not only a mentor, but a sponsor as well. Somebody who really believes in you so much that they will help you move forward in whatever your goals are, and really back you in that. And I would say that, similar to Emma, I mean, it was certainly very hard. Those first 6 months that I had transitioned from Texas, a small club in Texas, to a large world-renowned club in California, going to school, training like I said, 8 to 12 hours a day. There wasn't much life outside of that. And I just remember getting to a point where I was done. And I truly had not spoken to anybody. When I came to that decision, I had not spoken to anybody. I hadn't told my coach. I just literally called my family and I said, I'm done. I'm done. I want to come home. I want to go to college, and I'm done with, trying to go to the Olympics and training. I need time to figure this out. And I'll never forget, it was then that, people reached out to me. My coach, Chris Carver, she was across the world at a meet at that time, gave me a call and talked to me. She had seen the struggle that I had transitioning, again, from being sort of this big fish in a small pond. And now I was with the best of the best athletes. And I was having to come to terms with the fact that while I thought I had really, gone far in my sport, I was really had a long way to go. If I wanted to especially compete at the Olympics, which was my goal, I was definitely going to have to hunker down and be able to go through a lot of failure in order to get there. And that's a really hard thing for athletes to accept, that you are going to fail, right? I mean, we want to succeed. And so not only did my coach reach out, many coaches reached out. I had people coming to me and other elite athletes on my club team come around me and say, Carrie, this was the one thing. And I tell my kids to this day, they go, you have so much potential. We don't want you to regret this decision. We don't want you to look back and you not to feel, supported, loved, and we know you can do this and it's going to be hard, but we believe in you. And I really feel like it's also the time when my teammates at the time that, you know, many of them were new to me. I mean, I had competed against them, you know, nationally, but they were my teammates. It's really when my teammates ended up becoming my sisters and my brothers at that time. And they're really the ones that saved me, along with my coaches, Michelle Costanza, and so many athletes, and Chris Carver, that really came to, you know, wanted me to really reach that next step. And so in that, I had mentors, I had sponsors, and it was the first time that I really realized that the next time I'm in this place, I need to communicate how I'm feeling and be okay with it. It's okay to talk about the difficulty that you're going through, and that this isn't easy, and you know, get the help. I mean, it was a very, very difficult time. But when I made the decision to stay, I remember calling my mom and dad, who were on their way literally to get me. I mean, they were like, "Yep, let's go, come home." And I said, "All right, you can still come, but it's just gonna be for a vacation now. I'm staying." And I never looked back. I never looked back. And I also didn't have any regrets.
So for both of you, you've identified transition point of going from your smaller club team to an elite club team, and there's been struggles there. What's been the struggle like once you've gone from like the elite team to like now you're out of sport as an elite athlete? And so what was that transition time like? And what were like the biggest challenges that you've faced?
Should I start?
Yeah, go for it. Go ahead, Adam.
I just was so lost. Like you know, at the time I actually was really struggling to figure out when I should retire from competition. I was very lost of when I needed to retire and when I didn't. And, you know, I was so confused that I made that decision to retire. I was very burnt out at the post-competition phase of my life, and mentally and physically. And you know, I admit that at the time I wasn't as in love with the sport as I've always had been. And I really, you know, I struggled with that a lot. So as soon as I finished, I was kind of like, oh my gosh, well, what happens now? Like, this was like, I really identified my entire life with this sport, and now I didn't have it. It took a lot of soul searching, and it takes time. And, you know, I'll always emphasize, like, I loved the internships that I did, you know, the summers in college, because it really helped me figure out things that I didn't want to do, things that still kind of interested me. I had danced a summer in college, and I did a marketing internship with an art company, and it kind of made me feel like I wanted to stay creative. It was in that moment that I realized, you know, I have like this creative mindset, and maybe I can apply that into my sport more. I kind of missed my sport after some time away, and that's when I auditioned for Le Rev in Las Vegas. And I went out for the audition, and I absolutely had like a change in the way I looked at the sport, a change in the way I looked at my future. And this was kind of like an amazing thing for me, because I wasn't even sure at the time if I wanted to go because I thought I was burnt out. So it's definitely a hard transition, but I think if you can say yes to as many new things as you can, you'll eventually figure it out. You'll figure out the things that you don't want to do, the things that you do, and it will all work out in the end. Like, it'll all be okay. So that was a hard transition, but you know, you make it through.
Thanks for sharing that and being open to saying like it's a struggle. It's tough, and you kind of lose yourself. But you lean on others, and you do the reflection work to regain that sense of purpose.
A lot of reflection. Yeah.
Carrie, I know you've talked a lot about doing that work and being intentional about it, and then, you know, facing, you know, like you earlier you talked about facing the fear of failure. and giving yourself permission to fail and to try. And I mean, as athletes, like athletes fail more than anyone else because like, you know, especially artistic community, like that's the whole point of practicing your routines, because like you're going to make the mistakes, you're going to learn from them, and that's how you like know how to perform. So like the real world is no different. But I know you've done a lot of work and thinking about it and writing about failure outside of sport and taking that same mindset. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah. So, you know, I was just like anyone else where, you know, I thought that the second that I was done with my sport, that I would have no work ethic. There was going to be no structure, right? Nobody was telling me where to show up, what to do. And that, you know, what I was lost, right? And I started to, you know, it was really at that stage. I mean, from the moment that I retired in 2000, I knew I was very, you know, I knew for a fact that I was retiring after the 2000 Olympics. There was no question. I had been in the sport for 16 years. So it was time. I wanted to go on to college and finish college and start my career. But, you know, there was actually a moment at the Olympics that can happen to anyone. It's happened to a million athletes, but it's not something you plan for. It's really hard to, I would say, plan for failure. But I learned a really big lesson that I've taken with me these last 20 years into this next phase of my life. And when I was at the Olympics, our first routine, the short program, I actually raised my leg up within literally the first, you know, 30 seconds of the routine before everybody else, which in a short program, you have to all do the same thing at the same time. There is no, you can't be any different. And I was a good second off from everybody else. I had never done that in practice. It was not something, it was completely just a mishap. And we went on to finish the routine in a very flawless fashion. But I knew that entire routine, which I was proud that we were able to finish and I was able to get back mentally on track. But I knew, my team did not know that I had made that really big mistake. And it was awful. I can remember, you know, locking myself in a bathroom afterwards, hysterically crying. I didn't want our competition to see the breakdown that I was having. I felt like a failure. I felt like, how could this happen? How could 16 years of training and you make a mistake like this at the Olympics? This was your dream. This was your team's dream. To take that all in was, I can tell you, one of the most difficult. I've had a lot of difficult moments in my life, but it was a very difficult moment. I'm really thankful my team, you know, rallied around me. My family rallied around me. I mean, I can remember the exact moment that I had to go up, you know, to the stands. My family, my grandmother, my mom, my brothers, best friend, aunt, cousin, watching me and not realizing that I had been the one who made the mistake. You know, we all kind of have the similar legs. So it was, you know, they didn't know. They thought, but they weren't sure. It was a devastating moment for me personally, but it was also the moment where I realized I'm a human. Sure, I'm an elite athlete, but I'm a human being and I made a mistake and it's okay. And, you know, I failed in that second, but it really was the next 20 years and how I took that failure. And at least to me, it was a failure. And really applied it to everything else I did in my life. You know, we as athletes, whether you're an elite athlete or a recreational athlete, you are somebody who really tries to rise above and succeed. And there's a lot of weight in that. There's a lot of weight on your shoulders in being an athlete, because you want to do your best. You want to succeed. You want to be better than the people around you or be the best team. And for me, I really took that moment and took that weight off my shoulders. I realized that failing is actually a part of succeeding. It's a part of the journey. It's a part of how we grow. It's a part of how we get better. And so everything I did after that in my career, I wasn't afraid to apply to that random job that I didn't know anything about. I've never been afraid to talk about something that maybe I don't have all the technical skills or every single thing that they post on that job description, but I have the work ethic and I have the determination and I have the perseverance and I have the ability to take feedback and listen to people. And those are the things that I realized, the tools that I had gained as an athlete over the years that I've taken into this next stage of my life. And so, taking that weight of failure off your shoulders and really turning it into something that can help you succeed, it feels lighter. And it's one of the things I always tell people, even as a leader in my last firm, it was always some of the coaching that I gave. I'd rather see you fall and do your best than succeed and not give your best, right? I'd rather see you fall and pick yourself back up, because that shows me you have the perseverance to do better. And for me, that is a really important quality and attribute that as athletes you can take. So don't be afraid to apply to that job that you're not qualified for. Don't be afraid to, try something new. It's okay. It's absolutely okay.
Absolutely. I appreciate you sharing that story. And I think in addition to that, as athletes are navigating life after sport and looking at, what's next in the career field when they feel like they don't have the experience that their peers
Right.
might, that's could be really daunting. At the same time, like you mentioned, there's a ton of transferable skills that athletes bring to the table. And, all it takes is a little bit of time to self-reflect, to understand, okay, what are those qualities and skills that made me the best artistic swimmer that I could be? And those same skills and traits all apply in the career space. In addition, the one thing that we had talked about previously was that, like, as you noted, like you were an athlete for 16 years and it took you 16 years to be at the top of your profession. And there's an idea or a feeling for athletes when they move from sport into a career that they need to achieve at the same level as like their highest athletic achievement, but they want to do it in a compressed time.
Right.
Like I have to be, I am an Olympian, I'm a national team athlete. Now I have to be a CEO or a director or like have this amazing title within the next 6 months, because everyone thinks I'm this amazing person and I have to uphold that expectation. When in reality, like, no, you have to give yourself permission to like continue to grow the same way like you grew as an athlete.
Yeah.
I think that's a really important aspect. And if you want to talk a little bit about that, go right ahead, please.
Yeah. No, I mean, so kind of leading into that, I was just thinking when you were talking, I was thinking of my first interview that I had after I, graduated, after the Olympics. And I was so nervous. And they kept saying, "Oh, but we love athletes. I mean, athletes are great." And I remember not thinking that going into the interview, but as they kept saying that, I'm like, why are they saying, well, athletes are so great to have, in our company, and they do this. And I started going, you're right. I worked for so long. I have work ethic, right? I know I can work hard to reach a goal. I can persevere through really difficult things and come out on the other end. I can fail and stand back up and pick myself back up. I can listen. That's something that's really, really important in the outside world of sports is being able to listen. How many times did I listen to my coach over and over? I made the same mistake over and over. And finally it would sink in, being able to take that feedback, the negative, the constructive criticism and the not constructive criticism is a really important tool to be able to take into that next that next phase of your life. And I know for me, I mean, look, you're right. We want to succeed and we want to succeed fast. That's just a trait that is a part of our DNA. And I know I learned really quickly that, oh wow, I'm not going to be the star. This is going to be very similar to when I was going from that small club to the big club, and I am going to have to start from the ground up. And that was really a really pivotal moment. So asking all the questions, I wasn't afraid to ask, okay, what do I need to do to get here? How do I do it? You know, be proactive, ask all the good questions. That's so important. Don't be afraid to show weakness. Don't be afraid to show that vulnerability. I think that's something over the years that I've coached just so many people, a part of my career teams, if you will, is that I want to see that vulnerability. Show me that you're willing to learn. Show me that, you know, you're not perfect. You do have weaknesses, and be able to speak about them freely. You're not going to get fired from saying, this is my weakness, I want to get better. You're not going to be punished for saying, this is my weakness, you know, this is what I need to improve. Those are the things that are actually going to allow you to get to that next stage in your career. And so for me, I started again pulling from that tool belt and going, all right, what are the attributes that I already have? And how can I now instill it in my career and start over? And it's huge. The good questions, find a sponsor, find somebody who understands you and wants you to succeed, and lean on them, lean into them. And again, don't be afraid of failure. It's huge. It's huge.
I couldn't agree more on that. And I think, you know, one piece too is that people, the larger community, they want to support Team USA athletes. So
Yes,
asking for
absolutely.
support outside of your community is pretty easy to do, because all you have to do is like extend that olive branch to say like, hey, I am looking to learn about finance. I am looking to learn about marketing. I'm looking to learn about, you know, a bevy of topics. And
Yeah.
if you ask people in those roles to say, can you tell me about how you got there and what do I need to do to get to where you're at? People would love to talk about themselves. And that's just a great way to start those conversations about finding a mentor, finding a sponsor, finding those connections who can get you to the places you want to get to.
Yeah.
So with that, like, I have some more questions I can certainly ask, but I want to turn it to the group. I want to certainly open up the conversation now to everyone who's attending, and open up the questions here for Carrie and Emma. So feel free to put them in the chat, or feel free to unmute yourself. Ashley, I see you unmuted yourself, so go right ahead.
Yes. So first, I'm definitely here to support my board members on this call, and I'm really happy to see my board members and what you guys are doing. I support 100% what you guys are doing, so thank you for this. My question is this, and there's 5 former national team members on this call. My question is, I think as an organization, we need to try to establish that transition help, you know, because I understand hearing, you know, find a sponsor or find this person. I think we need to be that support. So I would love to hear from the 2 ladies. Looking back, what would you have liked to see your organization do to help you with the transition from an athlete to now an adult, or, you know, transitioning into the real world after an athlete? So maybe we as an organization could put things in place that we support you all, because you guys have gone and represented our country at many meets. And, you know, it's almost like, it's like you guys are veterans, right? It's like the same thing with the military. You've gone on. How do we, like, looking forward, or actually looking in the past, what would you have liked to see? Or what would you like to see in the future that us as an organization can do to support that transition for you all?
I can speak to that real quick, just because I think there needs to be a role. I think there needs to be a sponsor for every athlete that leaves the sport and goes in. I know that the USOC certainly obviously has this. You can't support every single sport and every single athlete. So I do think that as a sport, I think artistic swimming should have this. And I say that because I have been called, I can't tell you, you know, there's not too many of us, to be really honest, that have gone into the business world from our sport. And it's not in bad or a positive. It's just the way it is. And, you know, so I've been called a lot over the years, and it just has it's one of the reasons that I'm on the board now, because I started realizing there's a need for somebody like me who's gone on and has taken another road and another path. I coached after I swam, and it's still one of my favorite jobs to this day. I mean, if I would be a coach in a heartbeat. I think it's the most important job that there is. And so for me, having somebody that has done this and can sponsor and help and guide, I think is really important. I mean, I've seen the need for that for years now. And so for me, that is exactly why I'm back involved in the sport, because I want to help, I want to give back. And I see the struggle that athletes are having with that transition.
Yeah. I think to speak on that too, I think sometimes there's like a negative thing that I felt this a little bit when I left national team. I felt like it was like a negative thing, and I felt almost like, oh my gosh, I can never return back. Like I left, and as time moves on, you kind of heal from that. But I think we just need to almost encourage that life is going to move on eventually. You're going to take next steps. And sometimes that doesn't even mean staying involved in the sport, or maybe later down the road, you will be involved in another way. But I think we just need to, as a community, as our sport, just support that more. And I know in my MBA program, it's really helped me. We have a community page. It's kind of it's called Workplace. It's like a form of Facebook. And I mean, there's thousands of people just in my program on this that have graduated from the program and are currently in the program. And it's just, there's different pages with this that we, people who are looking for employment, or people who are just trying to connect with other people who have similar jobs. It's just a really great way to connect. And maybe this would be a really great way for our sport to connect people. I could really connect with Carrie as somebody who's, studying business, and, something like that could really be awesome for our sport, to encourage athletes to reach out and lean into other former artistic swimmers. So maybe that's a good idea for this.
Yeah. And
Awesome.
go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I think that's awesome. I just wanted to hear, if there was anything that you ladies thought, now looking forward, knowing what we've all went through, now looking forward when it comes to USA Artistic Swimming, and Morgan's really good at just organization and getting things, moving things forward. Maybe that's something to possibly think about. Hey, how do we connect these athletes? How do we make sure that we just don't cut the strings and be like, see ya, good luck?
Yeah. And
that's what we don't want.
Yeah.
And I'm sure between Morgan and Olivia, both on this phone call, can definitely agree with me when I'm saying we just don't want to just say, all right, it was great knowing you, peace.
Yeah. And I mean, so Ashley, and I can speak, and again, just speaking really real, that was my experience. I mean, unless you were a coach or stayed in the sport, I mean, that was really kind of it. Right. And so it took me many years to get to a place where I was really had a desire to give back and make a difference, and 20 years maybe. And so that's why I'm here today, because I do think that that's really important. I mean, I was an Olympic athlete. I literally gave my life for years. I mean, 12 hours a day, 14 hours a day, midnight, I don't even know. And then it was good luck, best of luck to you, And so, look, I do think, I was in a position, my family didn't have a lot of money. It was pretty much, it was all right, Olympics, 2 months later, you go to college, you finish really fast, and you go to work. And I worked all through college. There were no options in that. And so for me, it was probably a little bit easier because I didn't have many choices. It was go to work, get it done, let's go. And so, but I think that, creating something, even, having I mean, I'm, of course, from a business perspective, I'm thinking of simple things. I mean, there's so many things that, I've done over the years, but even having a LinkedIn group. You know, I've done a lot of LinkedIn, I would say, lessons over the last couple of years with a lot of my former teammates, with a lot of other, you know, athletes that have reached out to me, seeing what I've done and saying, you know, how do I even, you know, connect with people? How do I network? You know, how do I find, you know, these jobs? And so I've done a lot of, you know, trainings on that. And I think it would be so, you know, I think it would be so impactful for our sport to actually have a specific role like that.
Right.
Because this is a very unique sport. I know every sport trains a lot, but this is a sport where you have to have 8 people looking exactly the same, right? That it takes a lot of time. There's a lot of time and hours that go into that. So I do think that it's incredibly important, and it's such a great point, Ashley.
One thing I just want to add on to that, just having worked in the space with a number of athletes and NGBs, is that starting the conversation around life outside of sport shouldn't start at the transition period of when an athlete's done.
Right.
If we
Right.
can start the conversation within artistic swimming of creating space for the athletes to do the personal professional development earlier on. And
Yep.
that's not a lot, but even just like maybe 1 hour a week,
Yep.
having coaches carving out that time to do personal development so that athletes can cultivate those interests outside of sports, and that they can cultivate the identity as a whole person and not just as an artistic swimmer, so that when they're done with sport, like they're lost and they don't have that
Yep.
sense of purpose. I think creating that is a huge piece. And we've done work with other sports, and USA Swimming is an example of, you know, Carrie, to your point about creating LinkedIn groups, we did that specifically for USA Swimming, but rather than talking about it for a job, it's like, how can athletes leverage that platform as athletes for brands, for sponsorships, for connections, for speaking engagements, to serve as ambassadors of artistic swimming? Those are those opportunities to develop those skills as an athlete that are going to translate into a career later on in life. So that's just something I wanted to drop in there. What other questions does the group have?
I have one. Hi, Liz Corman here. I want to echo a little bit of what Ashley was saying, and as well as what you were just touching on, that, you know, we need to have some resources. I think what Ashley is speaking to is the ultimate goal. I do wonder what we could do now on the level of, you know, having coaches and parents and, you know, support people talking to athletes to anticipate their transition. How can we raise awareness among, you know, coaches and parents alike to make sure that they're really talking with the athletes and making sure that they're taking time to be introspective?
I'll start that, and then Emma, I think I want to kick it to you. But I think I think from a standpoint of like the coaches and parents giving space to listen and listen to the athletes when, like, you know, if they're like, you know, when Carrie talked about like she was struggling, she wanted to quit. Like if there's that psychological safety space for athletes to trust, to be able to say, I am struggling with this moment. Like, here's what I'm thinking. I think just being able to listen without trying to create answers is a start. I think the work that Morgan is doing and Olivia is doing to like bring the community together to have this conversation is a huge, huge start. Yes.
Absolutely. I was going to say more. I mean, what this is the start of it, right? I mean, the fact that Morgan had the, foresight and the idea to start this conversation is huge in of itself. So, I mean, this is where it starts.
Yeah. And I think I know like my experience at Ohio State, I think the coaches there did a really great job of integrating and time for like real world lessons, like life lessons. We would have seminars like as a team, like financial seminars, like how to, change a tire, or, are you taking classes that you're actually interested? Like we would bring people in, and I know that program, I think personally, my experience in it did a really great job of kind of like prepping me for that life after sport. And like seminars like this, I wish I had this like 3 years ago. This would have been like a lifesaver for me, just to hear, what might be coming next, and it's okay to be a little scared of it, but you know, so I think just having seminars like this and seminars to just, introduce that like real world stuff into our lives, I think would be really helpful in general. So
I have a question. Just wondering, to get something started, because I know if you want to do something kind of at the national level, but I'm just wondering, because I don't, and I'm thinking I should, do many coaches keep in contact with their alumni? Of like, hey, how's it going in college once they graduate? I mean, I kind of keep in contact through Facebook, but is there anything in that arena that maybe as a coach we can be doing for just our kids that just graduate and move on from our program?
I mean, I think it's always helpful to have your coach reach out post program. I've had multiple coaches, from all different teams that I've been on, reach out to me and check up and see how I'm doing. And I know for me, that's been an amazing support system. And that's kind of where, like when we were talking about earlier, like leaning into that support system. I think when coaches can do that for their athletes, that's like the most amazing thing that they can give. And that had helped me a lot through my transition. Because when I went to perform in Vegas, my coach at Ohio State was one of the performers in that show. So I had so much interaction with her, and, she kind of guided me through that process. And that was pretty amazing of her. And I think as coaches, that's one of the best things you can do. So I would encourage that.
I think we have time for one more question before we have closing thoughts. All right, if there's no other questions, Emma and Carrie, if there's one or two last takeaways that you want the artistic community to, gain from your words of wisdom, what would it be?
Go for it, Emma.
I would just say, like, life is about transitioning. And the beautiful thing about being in this sport is that it gives you so many amazing tools and skills. And you're going to realize in life that you're going to use that so much. And you're going to be way ahead of many other people because you had this experience in this sport. And you're also going to have, I think, an amazing support system of teammates. And I've leaned into those teammates my whole life. So if those are those key takeaways, I would say lean into teammates in your community and realize you do have those amazing skills just from being in this sport.
Yeah, I agree, Emma. I mean, I was going to say, we not only have the tools, but we have the resources. I mean, there are so many athletes that have gone on to do so many different things, whether it's still in the sport or outside of the sport. And it's truly unbelievable. So utilize those resources. Don't be afraid to network. I've started my own company in the middle of a pandemic, and I can tell you, I'm essentially in a transition phase of my career. I was at a big firm, Ernst & Young, for many years, and took all of the things that I learned there to start my company. And I've had to start over. I've had to reach out to so many people for advice, for help, for networking. And I had learned over the years, like the worst that can happen is somebody says, no, sorry, I can't help you. Don't be afraid. I've had people go, well, but should I just email them, or is it okay just to, reach out to them on LinkedIn? And I'm like, absolutely. It's okay. Absolutely. Don't be afraid. Again, the worst that could happen is that somebody says no. Be be bold. Be bold. I mean, these are the things that we learned as artistic swimmers, to be bold and to put ourselves out there, and don't be afraid of that.
Emma and Carrie, thank you so much for sharing your experiences and your words of advice. I really appreciate it. I loved getting to know you each more. And I'm certain the artistic community appreciates it as well. And to Adam, Morgan, Olivia, thank you for inviting me to support the artistic group. I'm still here as a resource, continue to use me. I know my colleague Megan Walther feels the same about that. Great job by you all in pulling this together. Adam, I'll turn it over to you for some closing thoughts.
Yeah, I want to first, we'll give a Zoom round of applause. So leave your mutes on, but go ahead and give the round of applause to Emma and Carrie. And thank you, Terris.
Morgan. And Morgan.
Together. And then most specifically, honestly, don't jump the gun there on me, but Morgan and Olivia, because it was them that brought it to my attention in this form, right? We've all known that there needs to be more work done here, but how to do that and get the manpower to do it, this starts that conversation, and we have some good takeaways from it. And I really appreciate that. And anytime I can hear a story from the likes of Emma and Carrie, it turns some light bulbs on in my head that helps me realize what still needs to be done, how we can mend some of the wrongs of the past and make things better for the future. So I appreciate you guys sharing that. There are so many opportunities that were shared tonight on how we can help with athlete transition, right, within the sport and beyond the sport. And that goes college, coaching, judging, becoming a part of the staff, right? All those things are available. Morgan, Olivia, Ashley's on this call, Carrie, Lauren, Emma, Joanne, Megan Azibu, they're all part of a board or a high-level committee that is involved with USA Artistic Swimming. So it's not always a professional transition to stay involved with the sport, but you can also serve in many other ways. And I invite everybody to be a part of that. If you have any interest, I'm always available, and you know how to get a hold of me. So thank you for that. Morgan, Olivia, any other parting shots that you would like to share?
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to thank everyone for joining tonight. Again, Terris, Emma, Carrie, thank you so much for sharing your stories and for that great conversation. To kind of address Ashley and Liz's questions, this is not the end of this. This is, as we mentioned, this is the first step. There will be more to come on this topic from us. We are hard at work, always thinking of our athletes, more athlete involvement on the board and all of our committees. So I'm really excited to see what we as a group can come up with in the future around transition and other programming as well. So if anyone on this call tonight or who sees this recording in the future, if you have any feedback or ideas for future work, please reach out to me, any of the other athlete representatives, or any of the staff, and we'd love to hear from you and see what we can do to make it a better experience to be an artistic swimmer. So please check your email. We will be sending out resources as a follow-up on this topic, and everything will go up on the website. And thank you again. Stay safe and happy holidays.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you, guys. Thank you,
Thank
Terris.
you.
Thank you, Morgan. Thank you, Emma.